I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 most used plugins for 2021. Now, let's be honest, there are so many amazing plugins saturating the market these days. It's really tough trying to figure out, which plugin is going to suit your mixing style and your workflow best. So to make it a little easier, I've narrowed down my top 5 plugins that I keep coming back to and I find myself using on basically all of my mixes. Now before we get started though, if you like this kind of content about home recording, gear reviews, music covers and even some filmmaking, then please make sure you subscribe and ring that bell icon so you're notified when I post future content. Starting at number 1, and in no particular order, is the Compressor by Waves. This is my go-to compressor on basically anything from drums, BVs, bass guitars, acoustic guitars. It's also my main use plugin for creating sidechain compression on instrument buses because it's one of those plugins I own that has a key input. Now you could have multiple of these on your tracks as it uses hardly any DSP, plus it also has a couple of nice options to fine-tune. So I've used the Compressor along my synth bus, and it's doing a couple of dB of compression, basically ducking when the kick is hit, just to allow that kick to sit a little bit more over the mix. Let me play you a little section of it. So it's quite subtle there, and like I said before, I don't want to really hear that pumping happening. I just wanted to be able to create a little bit of room for that kick to sit through. Another feature I love about this compressor is when the warm is engaged, it produces low-end harmonics, or if it's left in smooth, it'll be quite transparent. It also has an option to mimic an opto-style compressor or electro. Now second on my list is the Universal Audio 1176 Blackface. This is my go-to for vocals, and it's also my drum crush bus. The 1176 really is the most common compressor that you'll find in a recording studio. I actually have an outboard Blueface 1176, but the hairball edition in the studio, and it definitely gets a good workout. So this is the 1176E, so it's revision E. They've got different types of revisions that they've been modelled off. This one's been modelled off the famous Blackface. Now when I'm using this compressor, I generally want to be hitting the needle around 3 to 5 dB worth of compression. Sometimes, I let it go a little bit more, but generally for vocals, I like it to be sitting around 3 to 5 dB range. So let me just play you a little bit of that. The one thing that I love about this compressor is just the harmonics that it adds and the way that it colors a vocal. There's just something about this on a vocal that sounds so good. Now third on my list is the Valhalla Vintage Verb. This is honestly the best $50 you'll spend. The majority of producers and mixers I know have this Verb in their arsenal and they all swear by it. I've got an instance of Valhalla Vintage Verb on my guitar chamber bus. So I tend to use like big hall verbs, chamber verbs on my guitars in this song. So this is the dark string chamber. If you want to find out where that is, it's up here in Chaotic, and it's the first one called dark string chamber. It's my go-to for my vocals and for guitars. It's where I start. I basically just pull down some of that decay so it's not crazy, or I automate it in choruses throughout the song. But let me play you this little section of this guitar. I'll play you with it. Like you can hear that modulation, the echo, it just sounds so luscious and big and ambient, and honestly, when something doesn't sound good, I just chuck Valhalla Vintage Verb on and it sounds great, like it really does. The other thing that I love about this plugin is that it's just so easy to use. Like, when you're creating and sometimes it takes you too long to get to a sound, or you're trying to find this sound and you kind of lose your momentum. With this, it just makes everything a lot more quicker to achieve those results. So I'll just sit here going, scrolling through some of these presets, which all sound really good. You've got your ambiences, your chambers, chaotic, which is all those fun stuff, your gated reverbs, halls, huge spaces, plates, rooms, sanctuary, and then designer presets as well. And then over here you've got your color, so you can change it from now to the 1970s to the 80s, which will probably be more, having some of that mod on it. and then you got your different modes. You got an EQ here. You got your mod, which is just so handy because instead of me having to go and find another plugin with the chorus on it and then use more DSP, it's all built in already. Like, you don't even have to go anywhere, you don't have to hunt. Now, next on my list is the PROQ3 by Fab Filter. For any surgical EQ processing, this is my go-to. I believe it's one of the most versatile EQs on the market. And you know what? I only just recently bought it. It just has so many features packed inside it that I think I'll need to make a whole separate video about it. Now, not only is the PROQ a standard static EQ, but it's also a dynamic EQ, meaning when a certain frequency reaches a particular volume or threshold, you can then have the EQ compress that particular band or frequency. Similar to how like a multi-band compressor works, but it's way more surgical. So let's jump into Pro Tools and let me show you what I mean. So in this particular vocal, I noticed there was a fair build-up of low mid, and with a standard static EQ, I could dip those frequencies out and remove them, but if I remove those frequencies entirely from a vocal, especially this vocal, it's going to lose a lot of the tone. So let me play you this little section. Let's open up PROQ3, and you can see what I'm doing here. I'm attenuating that 170 Hz, and I'm also attenuating 554 to be exact. In a normal EQ mode, I would be pulling this frequency down like that, which is removing it right out, and you can still do that with this EQ, but instead I'm actually going into a dynamic mode. If you look at this slider here, this is how much attenuation you're doing. So if I grab a new band, let's just grab something here. So this is in a normal static mode, okay? Now to put it into dynamic mode, if you grab this little ring and see how it's turned red, that's gonna bring it into dynamic mode. Okay, and you can still change your Q, so how tight it is, how wide it is. And actually, so what that's going to do is whenever it hits a certain threshold, it's going to duck that frequency down. So I'm going to play this little section of the vocal, and I'm going to bypass it so you can have a listen to the difference it's making. So this is with it.
All of the things I've been wanting to feel, needing you finally came to real, don't know where.
So it kind of already sounds like there's a blanket over the microphone. And that's why I've boosted a fair bit in there. But also, this is actually helping a whole lot more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select these two bands, I'm going to turn them off, and I toggle them on and off while I'm playing the vocal back, and you're going to have a listen. So this is with it on.
All of the things I've been wanting to feel, needing you finally came to real, don't know where.
You hear straight away how the vocal sounds a little bit more muddy, and it's because we're pulling those frequencies out now that are being muddy, and those are actually causing the compressor to work a lot harder. So let me jump into the 1176, which is next up here. And I want you to keep an eye on the VU meter over here. Watch the needle of what it's doing. So this is with these bands in at the moment.
All of the things I've been wanting to feel, needing you finally.
We're hitting about -1, 3 dB, -3 dB on the gain reduction. Now, I'm gonna take these bands off. Now watch the needle.
All of the things I've been wanting to feel.
Straight away we're hitting -3 to -5 dB. So you can see that Fab Filter is actually doing a whole lot to actually make sure that it's evening out those frequencies before it's hitting that compressor. And this is the way that I actually like to mix a lot with my vocals, with guitars, with basically anything. I want to hit my compressor evenly. It's just the way that I like to do it. You don't have to do it that way either. There are so many more features jam-packed into this plugin that I think I need to do a whole separate video just on PROQ3 because it is so good. So make sure you grab that one if you're thinking of getting another EQ, because I highly recommend this one. Okay, so next up on that list is the Pultec EQP1A. I got this in the free bundle that you get, when you purchase your UAD software. So it's part of the legacy bundle. Now, this thing is just so smooth. I find myself using it on mainly vocals, and it's almost always on my mix bus. On vocals, I just love the air this thing adds. Let me play the vocal for you, and you can have a listen to what it's actually doing.
No one will ever know exactly how I feel about you. I felt it.
Like the breath and the air and the presence it adds to that vocal, and it doesn't get brittle at all. Let's head back over to the mix bus and have a look what I'm doing here. So generally with the mix bus, I've got the smiley face happening, which is a boost in the low end and a boost in the top end, which creates that smiley face. But here you can see I've got no boost happening in that low end. I've just got a boost at 16,000 Hertz again, at about 4 dB on quite a broad bandwidth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the track with the plugin engaged, and then I'm going to also bypass it, and you can hear the difference.
All of the things I've been wanting to feel, meeting you finally came so real. Don't know where I would be without you kissing me in the morning now. I know it's a little cliche to say, but I'ma say it anyway.
And you hear it's just exciting, all the top energy synths wise, vocal wise. It's just adding this really nice clarity to the mix that wasn't there before. This is why I love this plugin so much. Like if I do it with another EQ, I can guarantee it's going to get brittle. It's going to sound not as nice and smooth on that top end as the way that this thing reacts. Now, before you quit this video, I have a little favor to ask. Please let me know in the comments if this video was helpful for you, and also if there's any plugins that I missed that I should have mentioned. If you do like this type of content, then please make sure to subscribe and ring that bell icon on YouTube so you're notified of my new content. Thank you guys so much for getting this far, and I'll see you next time.